It began quietly with a faint sound no one could hear. A small team of scientists at the edge of the desert sat inside a metal dome, filled with computers and screens. They were listening to space like they always did, waiting for something different to happen. For years they heard nothing but static and noise, just the endless hum of the universe. Then one cold morning the pattern changed. A signal came in, soft but clear, shaped like a voice wrapped in electricity. At first they thought it was a glitch, maybe a reflection from a satellite. But when the message repeated, same tone, same sequence, everyone froze. It wasn't human. The computers translated the data, and what they found made their hearts race. The signal carried coordinates. Then, after a pause, it sent one more word. Warning. Within hours, every major space agency was awake. The message spread quietly, hidden from the public at first. Governments called secret meetings. Experts tried to decode the meaning behind the word warning. Some said it was an alert from an older civilization, maybe one that once lived in the Cygnus region of space. Others feared it meant something worse. Someone out there knew about Earth and they were coming. While leaders argued and scientists searched for more clues, the world below carried on as usual. People went to work, kids went to school, and nobody realized that above their skies something had shifted forever. The silence of the universe had been broken. Months passed. Then new signals came, faster, stronger, filled with strange geometric codes. They all pointed to one thing: movement. Something massive was traveling across the dark, heading toward the solar system. That's when the fear began to spread among those who knew. Humanity had always dreamed of meeting others in space. But no one imagined the first visitors might come as conquerors. The leaders of the Terran Coalition, the newly formed World Alliance, gathered in a hidden base deep below the surface of the Atlantic. They knew that Earth was not ready for war, not with other stars. Yet they also knew that waiting to be attacked would mean extinction. For the first time in history, every nation on Earth agreed to stand together. Old rivalries were set aside. Resources were pooled. The plan was bold, almost impossible, to build a fleet that could protect the planet from whatever was coming. The project was named the Dreadnought Initiative. Factories on Earth began running day and night. The deserts of Mars turned into glowing fields of construction sites, where steel skeletons of gigantic ships rose like mountains. On the Moon, the craters became dry docks where engineers worked under artificial sunlight, welding and assembling the first hulls. These were not ordinary ships. They were designed to be the largest war machines ever created by humans, each one capable of carrying thousands of people, with weapons powerful enough to crack asteroids and shields to survive solar storms. The people building them weren't just soldiers or scientists. They were dreamers. Some had lost families in Earth's earlier wars, some just wanted to protect their home, and others believed this was the next step in human destiny. They came from every corner of the world, young and old, rich and poor, working under one flag for the same goal: survival. It took nearly a decade before the first dreadnought, Elysium, was completed. When it launched from the Moon's surface, people across Earth watched it rise like a second sunrise. Its massive body glowed against the black of space, engines rumbling like distant thunder. For the first time in human history, Earth had built something that could truly defend itself among the stars. Soon, more dreadnoughts followed, each larger and more advanced than the last. They carried names that represented humanity's spirit: resolve, unity, tempest, courage. Together they formed the core of Earth's Armada, a fleet that could travel beyond the solar system. People started to feel proud again. The fear turned into determination. Humanity was no longer a silent dot in the galaxy. It had found its voice, but beneath that pride, a quiet tension still lived. The incoming signals never stopped. They became sharper, closer, filled with strange pulses that seemed almost like breathing. Space observatories detected faint energy trails, proof that something enormous was indeed approaching. No one could tell what it was or how strong it might be. The only thing certain was that it was getting nearer with every passing day. On Earth, everyday life tried to continue. Children still played under the sunlight. People still dreamed about the future, yet everyone could feel that something big was coming. The stars, once symbols of hope and wonder, now felt like eyes watching from the dark. Inside the command room of the Terran Coalition, officers stood around a giant holographic display of the solar system. A red dot blinked slowly near Jupiter's orbit. That was where the first contact was expected to happen. The fleet would meet the unknown there. The moment felt unreal. Humanity had gone from sending radio signals into space, hoping someone would answer, to preparing for a battle that could decide its fate. There was a man chosen to lead the Armada, a calm and steady commander known for his patience and sharp instincts. He had spent his whole life studying how to avoid war, yet now he stood ready to fight one across the stars. Before the fleet's first launch, he addressed his crew and the entire world through a broadcast. His voice was steady, carrying a quiet strength that silenced everyone listening. He said, "For thousands of years we've looked up and wondered if we were alone. Now we know the answer. We are not. But we will show them that humanity is worth remembering. If they come for us, they'll learn why the stars once feared the dark." Those words spread across the planet like wildfire. They were repeated in schools, in factories, in homes. People began painting them on walls and writing them on their hands. It wasn't just a speech anymore, it became a promise. Humanity would not go quietly into the night. When the first wave of dreadnoughts left orbit, the sight was breathtaking. Dozens of ships rose slowly, their hulls reflecting sunlight over oceans and mountains. The air filled with a low, distant hum that made even those miles away look up. People waved, cried, and whispered prayers. For the first time in human history, every single person on Earth watched the same thing together. Hope and fear stood side by side that day. The ships formed a glowing line across the sky, moving toward the edge of the solar system. Behind them, Earth grew smaller until it was just a blue dot. Ahead of them waited the unknown. No one knew what kind of enemies they would face or whether they would ever come back. But everyone understood one truth. The silence between the stars was no longer empty. Somewhere out there, something had noticed humanity's light. And now the light was moving toward the dark. The great shipyards of Mars had never been so alive. From the red dust plains to the steel domes glowing under the artificial sun, every part of the colony buzzed with movement. Sparks flew from giant welding arms, engines roared, and the sound of machinery echoed through the canyons. People worked in shifts that never ended. There was no night anymore, just constant work. Every hour mattered. Every bolt and wire meant survival. The Dreadnought initiative was no longer a dream. It had become humanity's heartbeat. Earth and all its colonies had one goal: to finish the Armada before the unknown forces reached the solar system. The fleet wasn't just about strength. It was about sending a message to the stars that humans could fight, build, and endure. On the moon, engineers worked inside enormous craters that had been turned into dry docks. From above, the sight looked unreal. Massive ship skeletons half buried in lunar rock, surrounded by cranes and shuttles flying like insects. Inside one of those ships, hundreds of people in silver suits moved carefully between steel beams. The air was thin and cold, but no one complained. They were building history with their hands. Every dreadnought was like a floating city. It carried thousands of people: pilots, scientists, engineers, doctors, and farmers who could grow food in space. Each ship had enough supplies to survive for years without returning to Earth. Their walls were thicker than mountains, made from newly discovered alloys that could resist plasma fire and cosmic radiation. The bridges were filled with glowing panels, and their engines could fold space to travel faster than light. Humanity had never built anything so advanced before. Still, there were problems. The first tests were disasters. The engines overheated, the shields failed, and once a reactor almost exploded. But the people didn't stop. They worked harder, slept less, and fixed one problem after another. Everyone knew that mistakes now could mean extinction later. There were moments of quiet pride too. When the first ship completed a full orbit around Earth, people on the surface could see it with their bare eyes. It moved slowly, shining brighter than any star. Families came out at night, standing in fields and rooftops, pointing at the sky. For a few seconds, they forgot their fear and just felt hope. Back on Mars, a team of designers watched as one of the largest dreadnoughts came to life. Its hull stretched longer than 10 skyscrapers, its engines as wide as city streets. It was named Unity to remind everyone what had made it possible. No single country owned it. It was built by humans for humans. Workers painted small flags from every nation across its sides. Some even left handprints on the steel plates before the ship launched, a quiet promise that their spirit would travel with it. Many of them knew they would never leave the planet, but their work would touch the stars. During this time, The coalition also began training the people who would live and fight aboard the dreadnoughts. The training centers were scattered across Earth's oceans, deserts, and even orbiting space stations. The recruits came from every background: scientists who had studied astronomy, soldiers from old armies, miners from asteroids, and pilots who had once flown passenger ships. None of them truly knew what waited out there, but they all understood what they were fighting for. The training was tough. They learned how to navigate in zero gravity, how to repair damaged systems in silence, and how to remain calm while floating between stars. Many struggled at first. Some left, most stayed. They weren't driven by glory or money. They stayed because they wanted to protect their families, their planet, and the small blue home that had given them everything. While all this was happening, scientists continued to study the strange signals that had started everything. The data revealed something terrifying. The source was moving faster than anything ever recorded. Its size was massive, possibly a fleet of ships, and its energy output was beyond anything human technology could match. It was still far away, but it was coming closer. The coalition made the decision that there was no more time to waste. The first line of dreadnoughts would soon leave for deep space patrol. The goal was to meet the unknown before it reached Earth's orbit. That meant every system had to be ready. No second chances. Inside the control room on Mars, screens flashed as final tests were completed. Power levels stabilized, engines hummed, and shields came online. A quiet sense of achievement spread among the workers. They had done it. They had built the largest fleet in human history. When the day of the first launch came, crowds gathered on Earth, the Moon, and Mars. The dreadnoughts stood like sleeping giants waiting for their cue. One by one, their engines lit up, filling the dark with golden fire. The roar of the thrusters rolled through space, silent but powerful, like the heartbeat of a planet that refused to die. As the ships lifted away, thousands of people on the ground saluted. Some waved, others cried, and many simply stared in awe. It was no longer about fear. It was about pride, unity, and the belief that humanity could face the universe with courage. The fleet took formation beyond the Moon's orbit, their massive hulls glowing against the sunlight. They practiced maneuvers, communication drills, and emergency protocols. Each captain learned to move in sync, like an orchestra of steel and flame. They were ready for the unknown, though no one could truly imagine what they might find. Days turned into weeks as the Armada traveled farther from Earth. Messages were still sent back home. Though with every passing hour the distance grew, people on Earth followed their progress through broadcasts, cheering for every successful test and every small victory. Humanity had never felt so united before. Still, there was a strange unease among the crew. Some nights, when they looked out from the observation decks, they could see strange flashes in the distance, brief bursts of light that didn't match any known star pattern. The scientists aboard called it background radiation, but many believed it was something else. Maybe the first sign that the other side was getting closer. Inside one of the ships, a young technician recorded a message to send back to Earth. His words were simple. He said, "If anyone hears this, tell the people not to be afraid. We're ready for whatever comes. We're not running anymore." Then he turned off the recorder and looked out the window at the endless black. In the following months, more ships joined the fleet. The dreadnoughts were no longer alone. They were supported by smaller vessels, scouts, carriers, and medical ships. Together, they formed the Terran Armada. From the command bridge, the view was breathtaking. Stars stretched in every direction, silent and cold, yet somehow alive. The officers watched the vastness ahead and felt both tiny and powerful at the same time. Somewhere in that darkness, an enemy waited. They didn't know its face or its reason, but they could feel its presence like a shadow watching from behind the stars. Back on Earth, people had changed too. Borders no longer mattered. Everyone shared the same hope, that the fleet would come back home safely. Music, art, and stories began to appear everywhere, inspired by the bravery of those who had gone into space. Children played games pretending to be dreadnought pilots, their laughter echoing through the streets. Even though fear lingered, life continued. The years of construction had changed humanity forever. They had built more than just machines. They had built belief. They had proven that when united, humans could achieve anything, even preparing to fight something they didn't understand. Then, one day, a new signal appeared. It was stronger than all the ones before. The energy readings were unlike anything seen so far. It came from beyond Jupiter's orbit. The crew of the leading dreadnoughts gathered in silence as the data appeared on the main screen. Something was there. Something big. It was moving fast. The commander looked at the readings without speaking. He didn't need to say what everyone already knew. The time for preparation was over. The dreadnoughts shifted formation. Power levels rose. Weapons were armed, shields activated, and the quiet hum of the engines grew deeper. Across the fleet, hearts pounded. They were no longer training or waiting. The first real encounter was about to begin. On Earth, millions watched the live transmission. The entire planet held its breath. The ships looked calm and steady, floating like glowing giants between the stars. Then, as the signal intensified, space itself seemed to ripple. Something began to emerge from the darkness. The next chapter of humanity's story was no longer about building or dreaming. It was about survival, and for the first time the Dreadnought Armada prepared to face the unknown. The stars around Jupiter had never looked so calm, yet every person aboard the fleet could feel the tension in their bones. The Dreadnought Armada floated in perfect formation, their lights glowing softly against the darkness. To an observer far away, they would have looked peaceful, like a chain of lanterns floating through the night. But inside those ships, silence ruled. No one spoke louder than a whisper. Every crew member waited for the unknown to reveal itself. Jupiter loomed ahead like a giant guardian, its red storm swirling endlessly. The fleet had positioned itself just beyond its orbit, where sensors had picked up strange distortions in space. For days they had watched small energy ripples appear and fade, like waves brushing the surface of invisible water. The readings were unnatural, too rhythmic to be random. Something was coming. Inside the command deck of the lead dreadnought, officers studied the holographic display. The red dot representing the unidentified object had stopped moving. It was holding position just outside visual range. The crew didn't know if it was waiting or watching. The silence was almost heavier than sound itself. A soft voice broke through the stillness, announcing new readings. The signal was growing stronger. Every screen began to flicker. The temperature sensors spiked, not from heat but from pure energy radiating through the void. Then all at once, the stars in front of the ships blurred. Space seemed to twist like liquid, and a sudden flash filled the dark. Out of nowhere, a shape appeared. It wasn't like anything human eyes had ever seen. The vessel, or whatever it was enormous, jagged, and shining like black glass. Its surface pulsed with light as if alive. Smaller shapes followed, dozens of them moving in perfect synchronization. No one said a word. Everyone just stared. It was the first time humanity had truly seen something not of their own world. The commander gave the order to broadcast a greeting signal. A calm, universal tone echoed through space, carrying peaceful patterns and data meant to show no harm. The response came within seconds, but it wasn't a reply. It was an attack. A beam of light so bright it looked like liquid fire shot out from the alien fleet. It hit one of the smaller human ships and tore through its shields in an instant. The explosion was silent in the vacuum, but on the screens it looked like a sun blooming and then fading into ash. Panic rippled through the crews. For a moment fear took hold. Then came the command. Defensive formation, shields up, prepare to return fire. The dreadnoughts moved with precision, their engines glowing blue as they spread apart. Plasma shields shimmered into place like transparent armor. The sky around Jupiter lit up as the first real battle between species began. The human ships opened fire, launching waves of energy rounds and pulse cannons. The shots streaked through the void, hitting the enemy ships and scattering them into strange fractured shapes. For a moment it seemed to work. One of the alien ships broke apart, twisting like smoke before vanishing completely. But the others adapted fast. Their movements became unpredictable, like shadows that refused to be caught. They moved between the blasts, firing beams that sliced through human defense grids. Every hit shook the dreadnoughts violently. Inside the ships, alarms wailed, lights flickered, and the air filled with tension. In one of the control rooms, engineers worked desperately to stabilize damaged systems. They shouted over the noise, running from panel to panel, patching power lines and cooling the overheating cores. No one thought about fear anymore. There was no time for it. Their hands moved with instinct, guided by training and hope. The commander ordered the use of new weapons, gravity torpedoes that could bend space around the target. The launch was risky, but it worked. The torpedoes created sudden ripples that pulled two enemy ships into their own energy fields. The sight was breathtaking. Light twisted around itself and the two alien vessels imploded silently, leaving nothing but fragments of shining dust. Cheers broke out across the communications line, but they didn't last long. The alien fleet was regrouping. More appeared from the distortion, almost as if the first wave had only been scouts. Humanity realized this was not just a battle, it was a test. The enemy wanted to see what Earth's weapons could do. The dreadnoughts fought bravely. They fired everything they had, using strategy instead of sheer power. Smaller human ships darted between the larger ones, acting as decoys to draw fire away from the main fleet. One by one they were hit and destroyed, their bright flares vanishing into the darkness. Yet for every ship lost, another found its target and struck back harder. Hours passed like minutes. The blackness around Jupiter became a storm of light. Explosions painted the void with red and gold, while pieces of metal drifted silently, spinning through the airless dark. Every person aboard the dreadnoughts could feel the weight of what was happening. Humanity's first true war beyond Earth. One of the ships, Unity, took a direct hit. The blast tore through its left side, cutting deep into its engine core. Inside, fire suppression systems activated, but the damage was too severe. The crew fought to keep the power stable as the ship slowly lost control. Still, they refused to abandon their post. They redirected all remaining energy to the main cannons and fired one last shot before losing power completely. The blast struck the largest enemy ship and shattered its front section. It was a small victory, but it sent a wave of courage through the rest of the fleet. Humanity wasn't running. They were fighting with everything they had. The battle stretched on until the alien ship suddenly began to pull back. No one understood why. They were winning, yet they retreated. The sensors showed them disappearing into the same distortion they had come from. The enemy was gone, leaving only silence and debris behind. Inside the command ship, the crew looked around at each other, exhausted and pale. They had survived, but at a terrible cost. 3 dreadnoughts were destroyed, dozens of smaller ships gone, and hundreds of lives lost. The survivors stared at the wreckage drifting around Jupiter and realized the truth. Humanity had just been tested, and the real war hadn't even started. The commander ordered a full scan of the area. The data confirmed that the enemy's technology was far beyond anything humans had imagined. The energy readings from their weapons defied known physics. The scientists aboard recorded every detail, hoping to learn anything that could give them an advantage. Messages were sent back to Earth, carrying both pride and sorrow. The news spread fast. Humanity had faced an alien fleet and survived. The world below erupted in emotion. People cried, cheered, and prayed. For the first time, everyone understood how small and fragile they were, yet how powerful unity could make them. The damaged ships were towed back toward the moon for repairs. As they approached Earth, people could see their broken hulls glowing faintly in the night sky. The sight was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Those ships were proof that humanity had fought the unknown and refused to fall. Inside the surviving dreadnoughts, the mood was heavy. The crews mourned their lost friends, yet there was a strange, quiet strength in their eyes. They had seen what waited in the darkness and lived to tell the story. They knew it wasn't over. The signals had stopped, but the galaxy had noticed them now. Somewhere out there, eyes were watching. Plans were being made. Back on Earth, new construction began immediately. The factories that had once slowed down were running again, louder and faster than before. The people had tasted fear and turned it into determination. The next generation of dreadnoughts would be stronger, faster, and smarter. Humanity would be ready when the enemy returned. The scientists continued to study the battle data. They found something strange hidden in the signal that came before the attack, a brief code buried inside the static. When they translated it, it was just one word, the same as before. Warning. No one knew what it meant. Was it a threat? Or was it a message from another race, trying to warn humanity about what was coming next? The question hung in every mind, unanswered as the Armada prepared for its next move. The people of Earth looked up at the stars, no longer with wonder, but with awareness. The universe had spoken, and it was not kind. Yet humanity had answered in the only way it knew, by standing tall, by fighting back, by refusing to disappear. The battle near Jupiter would be remembered for generations, not because it was a victory, but because it proved something far more important. Humanity was no longer a small voice in the dark. It had become a force the galaxy could not ignore. And somewhere beyond the edge of known space, the enemy watched in silence, regrouping, planning, waiting for the next encounter. The war for survival had only just begun. The smoke of war had not yet faded from the edges of Jupiter's orbit when the message reached Earth. Humanity had survived its first battle beyond the stars, but the cost was written in flame. Millions across the world stayed glued to their screens, watching fragments of broken ships drift through the black void. It was a painful sight. Every piece of metal floating in silence carried the story of someone who had stood their ground for the planet below. On Earth, the news spread faster than light. People mourned, but beneath the sadness was something stronger: determination. For the first time, the world understood what was at stake. The enemy was real, powerful, and waiting somewhere in the endless dark. Fear united people more than any speech could. Governments stopped arguing, industries stopped competing, and the human race began to act as one. The dreadnoughts that returned home carried not just survivors, but lessons. Scientists studied every second of the battle data. They learned that the alien weapons bent light and energy in strange ways, like twisting mirrors. They also noticed something even more curious: their technology wasn't perfect. It had weak points. The enemy ships had certain frequencies where their shields flickered for brief moments. Small gaps, but enough for a clever mind to exploit. Engineers, mechanics, and inventors from every corner of Earth came together. They redesigned the dreadnoughts, strengthening their hulls, improving their cannons, and creating new energy cores called quantum pulse drives. These cores allowed the ships to fire bursts of focused plasma that could disrupt the enemy's shield patterns. It was risky, unstable, and difficult to control, but it was humanity's best hope. Training centers grew busier. New recruits arrived in thousands. Some were veterans of old wars. Others were scientists, miners, or ordinary people who wanted to serve. Every person who joined understood one truth: the fight wasn't over. Humanity had survived one battle, not the war. Meanwhile, the surviving crews repaired their ships and prepared to return to space. Many of them carried scars from the last fight, some physical, others invisible. They had seen things they couldn't explain. They had looked into the black and felt it looking back, yet none of them backed away. When the call came to form the new Armada, not one of them hesitated. The second-generation dreadnoughts were something the galaxy had never seen before. Their designs were sleeker, faster, and more flexible. They could bend around gravity wells and move through space with almost silent grace. The engineers called them living ships because their systems learned and adapted with every mission. When the fleet was ready, the new mission was not just to defend Earth. It was to take the fight outward. Humanity decided it was time to know what lay beyond the darkness. The enemy had attacked first, but now, humans would cross the stars to find out who they were and why they came. The launch was massive. Billions watched from every continent as the new Armada rose into the sky. The air trembled with the deep rumble of engines that glowed brighter than sunrise. The ships disappeared into the upper atmosphere, leaving behind a planet filled with hope and silence. Days later, the dreadnoughts regrouped beyond Mars and began their journey. They moved in formation, engines glowing like a line of stars stretching toward infinity. Inside, life went on. Pilots checked systems, engineers shared quiet meals, and doctors treated the tired and the restless. It was strange. Space felt both endless and claustrophobic at once. Every crew member carried the weight of a whole world on their shoulders. Their destination was the edge of the solar system, near the Oort cloud, where the enemy had last been tracked. Scouts had detected faint energy trails, signs that the alien fleet might have left something behind. When the dreadnoughts arrived, they found ruins. Broken pieces of alien ships floated in silence, frozen in the cold darkness. The wreckage glowed faintly, still alive with strange energy. The scientists were stunned. The enemy had destroyed its own fallen ships before retreating, as if to keep humans from learning their secrets. But some fragments remained intact. The recovery teams brought them aboard carefully. Inside the alien metal, they found patterns, complex circuits that seemed to grow and change almost like living tissue. It was terrifying and fascinating at the same time. The discovery proved something vital. The enemy wasn't just mechanical. Their ships were partly organic, controlled by minds that blended machine and life. Humanity realized they weren't just fighting technology, they were fighting something alive. The data from those fragments changed everything. Scientists began developing counter-technologies based on what they learned. They created pulse disruptors that could interfere with the alien systems. For the first time, humanity didn't feel completely outmatched. As months passed, the fleet moved deeper into unknown space, far from the light of the sun. They found traces of other civilizations, ruined cities built on floating asteroids, silent stations orbiting dead stars. It was as if the enemy had swept through these places long ago, wiping everything out. The sight chilled the crew. They began to realize that the attack on Earth had not been random. It was part of something bigger, something ancient. The commander ordered the fleet to continue forward toward the Cygnus Rift, the same region where the first warning signal had come from. The closer they got, the more the stars seemed to dim. The energy readings grew stronger and the communication systems began to pick up strange whispers, echoes of unknown voices lost in static. Despite the fear, the fleet pushed onward. Humanity had always been stubborn. Curiosity and courage had carried them from caves to cities, from the seas to the skies, and now from the skies to the stars. Every ship in that fleet carried that same spirit. When they finally reached the edge of the rift, the view was haunting. A massive cloud of energy stretched across the void like a living storm. Lightning flashed silently through it, and shadows moved inside its depths. The sensors went wild. The rift was alive with activity. Then, just beyond the glowing mist, they saw it. An entire armada of alien ships far larger than anything they had faced before. Their shapes were sharper, their lights colder, their numbers countless. The crew fell silent, staring at the impossible sight. Humanity had entered the heart of the enemy's domain. The commander didn't give the order to attack. Instead, he told the communication team to send another message of peace. The signal traveled across the rift and disappeared into the glowing clouds. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then, a single transmission came back. Not in words, but in sound. It was the same tone as the original warning Earth had received years ago. It was followed by something new. An image. The image showed a planet, burning, broken, surrounded by ships like the ones in front of them. The meaning was clear. The enemy was showing them what had happened to others who resisted. It was both a threat and a memory. The crew watched in silence. Then the commander made his decision. Humanity would not turn back. They had come too far, and too many had died to retreat now. The order was simple. Advance. The dreadnoughts began moving into the rift. Their shields glowed as lightning flashed around them. The alien fleet started to move too, spreading into formation. The space between them filled with a tense, endless quiet. Suddenly, one of the alien ships fired a warning shot, a beam that grazed past the human formation. It didn't hit, but it was enough. The dreadnoughts responded instantly. Pulse cannons charged, gravity torpedoes locked on targets, and the engines roared. Yet before they could fire, something unexpected happened. The alien ship stopped attacking. Their lights shifted color, glowing softer. From their center, a signal came, strange and rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. The scientists quickly analyzed it. The translation shocked everyone. It wasn't a threat. It was a test message, repeating one phrase. "You are not the first." The fleet froze. The words made no sense. Who had come before? What had happened to them? The commander ordered the fleet to hold position. They tried to communicate again, but the signal vanished. The alien fleet slowly withdrew into the rift, disappearing into the storm. The humans didn't chase. They waited, confused and uneasy. It was clear that the galaxy was far more complicated than they had imagined. The battle at Jupiter had been only the beginning, and now new questions filled the air. Who had built those ships? What had destroyed the civilizations they passed? And what exactly did not the first mean? When the Armada finally turned back toward Earth, the silence on the decks was heavier than before. They had found no answers, only more mysteries. Yet one thing was certain: humanity was no longer afraid. They had traveled beyond the edge of light and come back stronger. As the ships crossed back into the inner system, their communication systems lit up with messages from Earth. People cheered, sang, and celebrated. They called the fleet heroes, defenders of mankind. But for those aboard the dreadnoughts, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the calm before another storm. Deep inside the rift, far from human eyes, something stirred. Countless signals began to awaken, spreading through the galaxy like ripples on water. The warning had been true. Something ancient had noticed humanity. Something that had been waiting for centuries. And now, it knew that Earth was ready to fight back. The war for the galaxy was far from over. The months after the Armada's return from the rift felt heavy, like the calm after a storm that everyone knew wasn't truly over. The people of Earth had changed. They no longer looked up at the night sky with wonder alone. They looked with caution too, as if the stars might blink and reveal something watching back. Every city was alive with stories of the fleet. Some said the dreadnoughts had fought creatures made of pure energy. Others claimed they had seen entire planets vanish into mist. No one really knew what had happened out there, except those who had been aboard the ships. And those who returned rarely spoke about it. They had seen things that words couldn't explain, things that didn't feel real even when remembered. The commander of the Armada was quiet in those days. He spent most of his time inside the orbital base above Earth, looking down at the planet he had sworn to protect. He wasn't proud nor relieved. He was thoughtful, and his thoughts were heavy. "You are not the first." The alien message still echoed in his head like a whisper in the dark. That sentence had changed everything. Humanity's greatest victory now felt like a small step in a story that began long before them. Earth's leaders came together again. Nations that had once fought over land and resources now shared the same goal: survival. For the first time, there were no borders, no divisions. The people of Earth became one race under a single sky. Factories that once built cars and planes were now busy creating parts for ships and exploration modules. The Dreadnought Armada was being rebuilt, stronger and smarter than before. The new ships were crafted from hybrid metal that could heal itself after taking damage. Their energy cores pulsed softly, powered by the quantum drives discovered during the last battle. Every system was tuned for one purpose: to go back into the dark and find the truth behind those mysterious words. Scientists across the planet worked non-stop, studying every bit of data from the rift. They learned something strange. The energy signatures found in the enemy ships were not random. They carried patterns almost like music. When played through instruments, the sound resembled a heartbeat, slow and heavy. Some scientists believed it wasn't a weapon system at all, but a form of communication, maybe even a cry for help. That idea spread quickly. It divided people. Some believed the enemy was not pure evil, that they were only following instincts just like any living thing trying to survive. Others thought that was dangerous thinking, that showing mercy could bring extinction. The commander listened to both sides but said little. He understood one thing clearly: no matter who the enemy was, humanity had to be ready for whatever came next. Months turned into a year. During that time, the dreadnought crews were retrained. The new recruits were younger, filled with fire and curiosity. They had grown up hearing stories of the first battle beyond Jupiter, and dreamed of seeing the stars for themselves. Veterans trained them patiently, passing on not just skills but lessons of humility and courage. The bond between them grew strong, so strong that the Armada felt like one living body with 1,000 hearts beating together. When the new fleet was finally ready, it was a sight no one could forget. Hundreds of ships floated above the planet, shining like diamonds against the black of space. People on Earth watched from the ground, some with tears in their eyes, others with pride. This was humanity's answer to fear, not retreat but exploration. The new mission wasn't to attack but to search. The Armada's task was to find evidence of other civilizations that had faced the same enemy. If "you are not the first" was true, then there had to be traces of those who came before. Maybe they had left warnings, maybe even hope. The journey began again. The dreadnoughts moved past Mars, past the cold belts of ice and rock, and into the outer void. They traveled through silent regions where no signal reached and no light returned. The deeper they went, the stranger space became. Stars seemed distorted, as if twisted by unseen forces. Weeks passed before they found anything. Then one day, sensors picked up an odd structure floating near a dying star. It was a station, ancient, broken, and silent. The crew docked carefully. Inside, everything was coated in dust, but the walls were covered with carvings. The symbols glowed faintly, alive even after countless centuries. After days of decoding, the team realized what they were looking at. It was a record, a story told in light and sound. It showed a civilization that had once thrived near that star. They were tall, luminous beings who built vast cities across the system. But one day, the same shadow that haunted humanity appeared. Ships like those seen at the rift filled their skies, and everything turned to fire. The carvings ended with the same message, written in their language but unmistakable. We were not the first either. The discovery shook everyone. It meant the enemy had been here for longer than any human could imagine. They weren't conquerors. They were part of something ancient, something that repeated across galaxies. The Armada collected all the data and continued onward. They found more signs in the months that followed. Ruined stations, shattered moons, and messages from civilizations long gone. Each message carried the same feeling: despair, warning, and faint traces of hope. Humanity was walking through the ghost trail of a forgotten war. Back on Earth, the news spread. The world fell silent as people realized how small they truly were in the endless ocean of stars. Yet instead of fear, something else began to grow: unity. People wanted to help. New volunteers joined research teams, and entire cities became centers of space technology. Children studied astronomy and engineering with dreams brighter than any comet. One evening, while the fleet drifted between systems, the commander looked out at the stars from his bridge window. His reflection blended with the universe outside. He knew the journey had already changed the human spirit. They had begun this mission as a frightened species defending their home. Now they were explorers, seekers of truth, carrying not just weapons but wisdom. Then, one night, everything changed. A faint signal appeared on the radar, pulsing at a steady rhythm, the same frequency as the alien message. At first, the team thought it was a leftover echo, but the signal grew stronger. It wasn't random. It was calling them. The fleet traced it to a massive structure hidden behind a dark nebula. The structure was unlike anything they had seen before. Half mechanical, half organic, almost breathing in the vacuum. It looked ancient, maybe millions of years old. The energy readings were off the charts, but the strange thing was, it wasn't hostile. When they approached, the signal changed. A new message appeared on their screens, written in simple patterns that translated easily. Cycle 73 complete. The Watchers awaken. No one understood what it meant. Then the lights inside the structure came to life, and holographic images filled the bridge. Beings of light appeared, tall, calm, and distant. They looked almost human, yet not quite. Their voices spoke directly into the crew's minds, soft and slow. They revealed the truth. The galaxy had faced these cycles of destruction for eons. Civilizations would rise, build wonders, and then fall when the harvesters came. Only a few survived each cycle, hiding or escaping beyond known space. The Watchers were ancient beings who had once tried to stop the darkness but failed. Now they had been sleeping, waiting for a species brave enough to fight back. The commander asked, "Why us? Why now?" The answer came like a whisper of wind through glass. "Because you resisted when others surrendered. You are the first to stand and not fall." The crew stood frozen. They realized the true weight of their mission. Humanity wasn't just defending Earth anymore. They were the first civilization in countless ages to break the cycle. The Watchers gave them knowledge, codes and energy patterns that could stop the harvesters from reactivating. It was dangerous information, powerful enough to save or destroy entire galaxies. The Watchers warned them that the cycle might return, but if humanity remained united, they could become the guardians of this galaxy, the first race to end the darkness. The commander accepted the gift with a heavy heart. He knew this meant another battle might come one day, but at least now they would be ready. As the fleet left the nebula, the Watchers faded, leaving behind a final message that echoed through every ship. Light is never alone in the dark. The crew carried those words with them as they returned toward Earth. They had seen the truth of the galaxy, the past, the loss and the endless cycles, but they had also seen hope. Humanity was no longer small. They were now part of something far greater. When the fleet arrived home, Earth erupted in celebration. Yet the commander didn't smile. He simply looked up at the stars and whispered quietly to himself, "The real journey begins now." For the first time in history, humanity's greatest fear had turned into its greatest strength. The Dreadnought Armada, once a symbol of war, had become the keepers of light, and somewhere far beyond even their reach, the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe, after all this time, had finally begun to believe in them too. After the fleet returned from the rift, Earth was no longer the same. Every city, every street, every household felt the weight of what the Dreadnought crews had seen. People looked at the stars differently now, not as twinkling lights, but as distant fires hiding secrets. The story of the Armada's journey spread faster than any signal. The phrase, "You are not the first," echoed in every language across every continent. It stirred both fear and curiosity. Who were the ones before humanity? What had happened to them? No one knew, but everyone understood one truth. The galaxy was alive, watching and waiting. The survivors of the fleet became symbols of courage. Yet inside, many of them carried memories that haunted their dreams. They had seen civilizations turn to ash, ships larger than mountains, and silence that could crush the heart. Some couldn't sleep for nights. Others stared at the sky for hours, searching for meaning in the darkness. But the commander, calm as ever, gave only one message to the people. "We are not alone, and we will not be the last to stand." Those words became the start of something new. Earth began preparing again, not for defense this time, but for understanding. Instead of focusing only on weapons, humanity started building the Galactic Research Union, a massive effort where scientists, explorers, and thinkers from every nation worked together. The main goal was to uncover the history of the galaxy, to find the civilizations that came before, and learn what destroyed them. The new mission wasn't about war. It was about survival through knowledge. While research continued, the Dreadnought Armada was expanded once again. The engineers worked day and night to create ships faster and smarter than ever. These new vessels carried both weapons and wisdom, huge data cores filled with everything humanity had learned so far. The fleet no longer looked like a war machine. It looked like a moving city, a symbol of Earth's strength and unity. Months passed. The galaxy seemed quiet, almost too quiet. The strange signals that once filled the rift had stopped. Some people thought the enemy had retreated for good. Others believed it was only a matter of time before they returned. The silence for humanity was not peace. It was suspense. Then one day, a deep space probe sent from one of the dreadnoughts picked up a faint energy signal. It came from a planet in a distant system, far beyond the known map. The energy pattern matched the same frequency found in the alien wreckage years ago. That meant only one thing. The enemy had been there. The fleet was called back into motion. Crews gathered, systems activated, and the engines roared again. The commander stood on the bridge, watching the blue glow of Earth fade behind them as the ships began their new journey. This time, humanity wasn't just defending. They were tracing the past, step by step, to uncover the truth. When they reached the distant planet, they found it half destroyed. Its surface was cracked and burned, its cities buried under black dust. Yet among the ruins, strange towers still stood, glowing faintly. The scientists landed and began exploring. What they discovered was beyond anything they had imagined. The towers contained records, symbols, and images stored in patterns of light. After weeks of decoding, the meaning became clear. The planet had once been home to a race that called themselves the Eleven. They were highly advanced, peaceful beings who had once ruled vast regions of the galaxy. They had built beautiful cities and great fleets. But then something had come, the same force that had attacked Earth, and wiped them out completely. The Eleven records also revealed something else. The invaders weren't just conquerors. They were harvesters, beings who fed on energy from living worlds. Every civilization they found became a part of their system. They didn't destroy for anger or power. They did it because that was how they survived. It was nature for them. The scientists realized the chilling truth. If Earth hadn't fought back, it would have been drained and forgotten. Just like this world. Humanity had done what others couldn't. They had resisted, and that resistance had caught the attention of the entire galaxy. The team sent the data back to Earth, and when the news spread, the world changed once again. Fear was replaced by purpose. The galaxy wasn't an empty ocean anymore, it was a battlefield of survival. Humanity now had a reason to exist beyond its own planet. The commander of the Armada proposed a new mission, to form an alliance of surviving civilizations, if any remained. The Dreadnoughts began exploring deeper, following trails of energy left by other fallen worlds. In time, they found small colonies, hidden survivors of ancient species living quietly among asteroids and gas giants. When the humans contacted them, many of them didn't believe at first. They thought humanity was just another legend. Yet when they saw the human ships, their hope reignited. One by one, the survivors joined. A network began to form, a fragile alliance united by fear and determination. They shared technology, knowledge, and stories of loss. Together they formed the Galactic Unity Pact, with Earth at its heart. The humans, once isolated and small, now stood as leaders among the stars. But the peace didn't last long. Strange movements were soon detected in the dark between galaxies. Signals returned, stronger than ever. The same pulse, the same rhythm as before. The enemy was stirring again. Only this time they weren't coming for one planet. They were gathering for war across the galaxy. The Unity Pact prepared quickly. The Dreadnought Armada expanded once more, now joined by ships from other species. They trained side by side, learning from one another. The human crews, who had once felt alone, now stood shoulder to shoulder with beings who had once been myths. When the enemy finally appeared, it wasn't like before. They came in waves, endless and vast, their ships spreading across systems like a living storm. But this time the galaxy was ready. From every corner, fleets rose to meet them. The humans led the charge, their dreadnoughts glowing like suns in the dark. The battle that followed was beyond anything history had ever seen. Space itself trembled as weapons of light and energy collided. Whole stars flickered under the force of the blasts. The enemy was powerful, but they were not invincible. The humans had learned their weakness, the pulse frequency that broke their shields. They used it perfectly. The commander gave one final order to the fleet. No world stands alone. The message spread across every communication channel, echoing in thousands of languages. It became the cry of resistance. Even when ships fell, others took their place. Humanity fought not for victory, but for the survival of life itself. The war raged for days, then weeks. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The enemy fleet started breaking apart, retreating into the shadows. The humans and their allies pressed forward, forcing them back into the same rift where it all began. The galaxy held its breath as the final battle unfolded. The dreadnoughts entered the rift once again, this time not in fear but with purpose. They reached the heart of the storm where the alien command core existed, a massive structure glowing like a black sun. The commander knew this was the source, the brain that controlled them all. With every weapon charged, the Armada fired together. The combined blast tore through the storm, shaking the void itself. The core exploded in a wave of light that spread for millions of miles. When the light faded, silence filled the galaxy once more. The enemy was gone. The war was over. The fleets returned to their worlds in triumph. For the first time, peace truly felt real. Planets that had never known each other before now shared one future. Humanity had not only survived, it had united the galaxy. The dreadnoughts, once symbols of war, became guardians of peace. They patrolled the stars not as soldiers, but as protectors. Years passed, and stories of the Great War became legends. Children grew up hearing about the brave crews who faced the dark and returned victorious. Statues were built, songs were written, and the stars that once brought fear now brought dreams. Yet deep in the silence of space, far beyond the reach of any fleet, something faint stirred once again. A small signal, weak, distant, but alive. It carried a familiar rhythm, the same pulse as before. Somewhere in another corner of the universe, the darkness was not completely gone. It was watching, waiting, learning, but this time the galaxy was ready. Humanity had risen, and its light now reached farther than ever before. The name of Earth's Dreadnought Armada had become more than just power. It was legend, a reminder to every living being that courage can turn fear into strength. and unity can turn darkness into dawn. The stars, once cold and silent, now carried the heartbeat of humanity. Steady, strong and eternal,